Hello you lot. We've got two savages on the bench because let's talk a little bit about the brakes. There's some people have trouble with these brakes, trying to work them out, and because if your brakes are too sharp, the truck is prone to doing front flips. And this one's got the standard brakes on it, the standard brake disc that would come with brand new. This is a Savage SS. This is a Savage 21. About 15 years ago I put the twin metal disc brakes on there, and we'll have a look at those in a minute. But this has got a slightly different setup to what this one has. So you can adjust your brakes in, I'd say probably 3 different ways. You can adjust them on the transmitter with your end stop, so that your brake servo will only go so far before it, stops, and that will give you your braking. I don't really like doing it that way because I don't know, I like to do it the mechanical way. So I have my servo go all the way, the end stop is at 100%, it go all the way, and then I adjust it mechanically or manually with the little adjuster on the end of this rod. Obviously that's if you've still got the original setup. Some people change these, some people get rid of them and just put like I don't know what they do, they put different servo horns and linkages from different trucks. I don't really know what they are. I've just kept the Savage ones because I don't find anything wrong with them. I think they work perfectly fine. Why anybody would want to change them, I haven't yet worked that out. But this one has got the twin discs on there. I remember back in the day, these were rated. I mean, they even advertised it on the telly as, your car will now do endos and it'll do front flips. Because with the standard brakes I found on this one, they weren't particularly good. Like they would stop the truck, but they wouldn't. You certainly couldn't do an endo. I mean, I had this adjusted as tight as it would go, and it probably might skid if I was lucky on dirt, but it wouldn't really do a lot. So that's why I put that one there. Now this thing will do endos. It'll flip over if you're not careful. You have got to be careful on the old lever, but I've got it adjusted in such a way that I can do full brakes if I want to, and it will do an endo, and it will flip if I'm not careful. Or I can just be gentle with the old lever, be very, very gentle, and it'll just brake just like a normal car. You just got to be careful with it. This one, you can't see it because it's got the bottom plate on it and I haven't taken it off, but it's got the original discs in there, the original disc that they come with when it was brand new. And this one has exceptional brakes, but this one's set up slightly different. You can see there's a piece of fuel tube on both sides of this one, whereas this one's got a piece of fuel tube on one side and it's a bit longer. That's because having the piece of fuel pipe there makes the brakes a little bit more, not quite as snappy, because there's a bit of give in this tubing. You can have like a hard piece of plastic pipe there, but there's no give in that. So when you put the brakes on, it's just going to be very, very snappy and very, very sharp. At least with the piece of fuel pipe, there's a little bit of sponginess to it, and that gives you more stable braking. And on this side I've got a smaller piece, but I've got this adjusted further in, and I've got another piece here. That means that when I accelerate, it takes the brakes off straight away, whereas on this one I didn't really find it was necessary to have it there, because when you accelerate it does its job and it takes the brakes off. It's because I've got 2 different braking setups, and I've been adjusting them to try and get them how they work really, really well. And because they're both different, no 2 trucks are ever the same. You can have 2 identical trucks, right? They could be identical. They could have rolled off the production line one after the other, but one will be different from the other one. And that's true for everything. That's true for cars, that's true for everything, computers, mobile phones, anything. None of them are ever the same. There's no 2 that are ever going to be the same. So you just have to experiment and play around and get them how you want them, and that's the way I've set these two up. So this is the first way that you can do it. You just have to adjust this. You turn this and turn it clockwise to go down the thread. That will make your brakes sharper. So that's one way of doing it. You just got to play around, keep turning this until your brakes are as sharp as you want them, or not as sharp as you want them, depending on what way you turn it. You can adjust the length of the fuel pipe that you put on here, because as I said, the length of it, obviously you'll have to work with this little adjustment on the end, and just play around and you'll get it. It's pretty spot on. If you play around long enough, you'll get it to exactly how you want it. And that's the same with this one. That's what I had to do. The other way of adjusting it is with the two screws on the bottom. So what you can do is, these are the discs here, these are the pads in there, and that's like a caliper. Well, it is a caliper, it's just a different type of caliper as what we're used to on proper full-size cars. So if you take some of the washers out, because when you buy this, or when they come new, they have little washers in there to space those pads apart, and if you take them out, and you might even need to put a smaller bolt in there so it clamps these calipers closer and the pads are closer, that will make the brakes sharper because there's less travel in between. You can also put spacers. If you haven't got a smaller bolt, you can put washers or spacers on this side and it will clamp them tighter together, but you just have to be careful not to clamp them too tight, otherwise your brakes will be on they'll be on constantly, they'll be rubbing, they'll be binding together. You want it so there's enough play in there, because there's enough play in there where that can go around. They're not going to rub, it's not going to bind, it's not going to wear your pads out, but when you brake, that will grip and that'll be really, really good. Make sure there's no oil on them either. But these brakes are simple enough. A lot of people seem to have trouble with them, I think because they don't really have a lot of patience. These trucks, they do need some patience, and you need to just slow down a bit and just look at them and think, how does that work? How can I adjust it? How can I make it work how I want it to? Understanding how something works is literally 80% of being good at it. So if you understand how the brakes work, you're 80% there to getting them working 100% how you want them to be. If you don't understand how they work, you won't be able to get them to work properly because you don't know how they work. You could just adjust the end stop so that when you push the brakes, the servo doesn't actually travel all the way. You could adjust it like that. You can set your brakes up like that so that your brake servo only goes a certain distance. I don't like doing it like that, but you can do. If you like doing that sort of thing, you can do it that way. That's one way. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say, and there is definitely more than one way to set up your brakes. You can adjust the trim just by adjusting the throttle trim. That will adjust your braking power, adjusting your throttle trim, but obviously at the same time it'll adjust your throttle. So if you've got your tick over and your throttle set nicely and it's working well, if you adjust that to do your brakes, you'll mess up your throttle trim. Now, the way your throttle is, that's what's called a throttle trim. But obviously because the throttle and the brakes are on the same servo, they will work, but you have to get the balance right. You can do it that way, but I find the best way is just to play around with this little adjustment on here and get it, and the length of the fuel pipe on there, and get it, pretty spot on to how you want it, like that. Really, I think that's probably the best way. That's the way I always do it. Always, I have the throttle end stops on 100%, so that they go all the way over. Well, maybe I shouldn't say 100%. I have it so that where the servo ends, it stops. You don't want it so that the servo's straining, trying to go further than it physically can, because then you'll damage your servo, you'll burn it out or do something like that. When I say 100%, I mean I have it so that it's at the end and it's not straining to try and go any further than it actually can. Once you've got that set up, then you can just play around with this little adjustment and you can get it pretty spot on. Depends how you want it. Everyone's different, man. I like it so that all I've got to do, if I want to do an endo or, you know, skid, all I've got to do is go slam. Then we got these wheels will lock up. Or if I just want to brake gently, just go gentle on them, man. It's just like a real car when you're on the pedals, you know. Just go gentle. And got proportional servos, man. So a lot of people are like flat out and stop, flat out all the way, you know. That's what a lot of people are like. But you got to think, you know, just do that, man. If you want a little bit of braking, just do a little bit, you know. Just get used to it. But where a lot of people are quite heavy-handed, that's the reason. But if you set this up, if you're one of those heavy-handed people and you are literally, you just full throttle, full brakes, full throttle, full brakes all day long, set this up so that when you've got full brakes on, you're not skidding and doing endos and doing front flips. But that's the best way to do it. Lovely trucks as well, these. Absolutely lovely trucks. Another little thing which I think is important to mention, because it does play a bit of a part in the way your brakes work, and that's down on here. You got this rod what comes out. This rod goes directly into where the caliper is, and it literally, when it turns, it pushes on the calipers, which pushes the pads together. Now this rod here, I've got them set up differently on these two trucks, so this is a good example. This, by the way, is a switch, because there is brake lights on the back of this truck. They don't work, but there is a switch there. It will work again one day when I get round to putting it back together. Anyway, this rod here, now the further down you have this, so the further it's poking out at the bottom there, you should get sharper brakes. Like this one, where I've got it literally just in there. There's a grub screw in there, by the way. That's what holds it in. In that hole there's a little grub screw. There's an Allen head, so that's how you adjust it. But you loosen that and then you can push that rod in and out. Now I'll put this one further up. Now that gives me more delay on the brakes, you know, less sharp brakes, because the servo has to move further in order to engage the brakes, whereas on this one it has to not move quite as far. That's brakes there, see? That's only just there, see? Not quite as far. The other thing is you have got adjustment on this top of this, what do you call that, like a turnbuckle, I suppose. You've got adjustment there, there's threads on that, so you can move this higher and lower, and it does the same thing. If you've got it lower, you should have sharper brakes. If you've got it higher, you should have less sharper brakes. They're both roughly in the same place, but this one is slightly higher up. The reason I've got this one set up like this is because obviously when I installed those disc brakes, the metal brakes, probably 15 years ago now, they were extremely sharp. So I set it up so that it wasn't quite as sharp, because it literally, like, you just had to touch the brakes and it would go, it'd flip over like a bloody rocket ship. It got straight over. So I had to literally loosen that right off. Loosen this right off. I had the long piece of tube on there because there's more give in that, so it makes it spongier. So when you do put the brakes on, it's not just as sharp. It's you know, there's a bit of sponginess there. It makes them a little bit more sort of cushiony. That's it. That's the word, cushion. There's a lot more cushion there. But that's definitely important to take note of that. So you've got that set in there, that set in there, the length of the fuel pipe that you're going to put on there, and also the adjustment there, and the spacers. But don't play around with the spacers on the calipers until you've played around with all of this, because that's more in-depth adjustment. The simple and basic adjustment is on that, and the length of that. And then if you still want to make them, if you still can't get it exactly how you want it, start playing around with the length of this going in and out of there. And eventually you will get it how you want it. You will get it spot on. It just takes time. As I said, everything to do with any RC is patience, and it just takes time. And brakes certainly are no exception to that. Brakes take a little bit of time to get set up right, especially on these trucks. If you've got a buggy, it's a little bit different, but you've still got several adjustments. but these trucks, once you get them spot on, and as you Americans say, dialed in, you'll be happy. You'll be over the moon. You'll have it working perfectly, and you'll be like, this is the best truck I've ever had. A bit on if you've got the opposite problem, because some of the people that end up sending me messages have got problems where the brakes are too sharp. But if you've got the opposite, where your brakes aren't sharp enough and you've tightened that adjustment up loads and they're still not sharp, they still don't really work, make sure that there's no oil or anything on your discs or on your pads. Get some brake cleaner and give them a good old clean. You might even have to take them off and clean them off so you can clean them properly, because any oil or nitro's a bit of a problem on these, because that comes out of the exhaust and then goes through these gaps here, or even underneath, even like that, and sometimes it can get blown and go on your discs and cause a little bit of a problem there. I haven't really had that issue, to be honest. Maybe once or twice I've come to clean them and there's been a lot of nitro on them, but they've never really not worked. But that can definitely happen. A lot of the time you can see nitro there, that's all nitro all along there. So it definitely, under here, look, so they definitely would get nitro on them. But if you've got brakes that aren't particularly sharp, make sure they're definitely clean. Other than that, your pads might be worn out, but that's just all common sense, that is. You don't need me to tell you that kind of stuff. That's pure common sense. Anybody would have that kind of information in their brain already. So that's just something to think about. Oil, and nicely chilling out after you've done that. Proper nice trucks, these Savages. If you've got any more questions on Savages, all you got to do, put it in the comments, and either me, if it's worth it, if I know, I'll make a video on it. If not, we'll help you out in the comments, either me or somebody else, because there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and we'll get you going again. Lovely trucks, man. Absolutely brilliant trucks, these Savages. Thanks for watching, you lot. All the best, and remember, never judge a book by its cover, and always treat everybody equally and with due respect, because everyone's the same, man. Just love life, love each other, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheerio, you lot.